Numerous draws, a significant victory for a London club that keeps on moving, and Leicester City, they just keep scoring goals for fun. Luis Miguel Echegaray here, Shaka, Hislop in the house, ESPNFC. Welcome. We are live recapping all the action from the Premier League. James Olley will join us later from the Emirates as we discuss Arsenal, and that's where we begin, everybody, as Arsenal, the Gunners, draw against a very resilient Brentford. Thomas Frank's side continue to really fight and push. Shaka, initial reaction. I mean, we were talking about it before we went live. Brentford, such fighters, and Arsenal, a win wasted, do you think? Initial reaction, buddy.
I thought it was a big day for Arsenal, again, that they needed to win, kind of given what's to come with the Manchester City games. But to start, Luis, you described Brentford as resilient. I think we've got to use far stronger terms for that. They're just a good team. In all honesty, I thought Brentford were the better of the two for long spells against Arsenal today. And I felt the way that they equipped themselves, the way that they tactically, I think, matched Arsenal speaks volumes to Thomas Frank and how he has his team prepared. Now, Arsenal tried to play the ball out of the back and do so with as good effect as anybody in the league. Arteta, this is what he wants them to do. They do this so very well. Brentford pressed high up the park and tried to force Arsenal into a mistake. When they weren't able to force that mistake, when Arsenal were able to press when Arsenal were able to pass out of that press, I was hugely impressed with how Brentford were then able to drop back in to two banks of four, get numbers behind the ball. So, in all honesty, I thought tactically Brentford were absolutely outstanding. Had Ivan Toney, who himself found the back of the net for Brentford, had Ivan Toney had a more Ivan Toney-esque day, they would have been 2 or 3 to the good before Arsenal were able to break the deadlock themselves.
Speaking of Ivan Toney, he did end up scoring as well, though 14 goals in the Premier League this season. But to your point, Brentford, I mean, it's not a coincidence, Shaka, why they're 8th in the Premier League. They're so good defensively off the ball. But I want to go back to a point that you said at the beginning. Arsenal, after that loss against Everton, we would have thought that it would have been a learning mistake, a learning curve for Mikel Arteta, Leandro Trossard getting his first goal for the club. So you thought, okay, maybe they'll keep on pushing here, but it wasn't to be. Are you worried a little bit now about the title challenges regarding the Gunners specifically? Because next up is Manchester City.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I thought this was a big game for Arsenal for a lot of those reasons. I think I'm right in saying the Everton loss was their second this season. So being worried, it's probably not a term that many at Arsenal are going to be using. I think the issue for us on the outside, for neutrals looking in, is that we know exactly how good Manchester City can be, even if they haven't been for much of this season. We know we have seen Arsenal teams in the past kind of succumb to pressure. Though, again, 2 losses so far this season, there's not a huge lot of suggestion that this Arsenal team will go that way. So you're kind of waiting for that perfect storm. That's from the neutrals. If you're Arsenal, if you're sitting in that dressing room, you see it very differently. I just think that on the back of that Everton loss, a loss that came away to Everton, who just appointed a new manager, and the new manager bounced. And in Dyke, you have a manager who knows this league so well and clearly had his Everton team prepared and up for it. You wanted a response. Probably the worst team you could have asked for. Well, there are not many worse teams in the league that you could have come up against in Brentford. A London derby against a team, and Thomas Franco had mentioned, tactically has been absolutely outstanding so far this season. And in Mbeumo and Ivan Toney have a very good strike duo. Ivan Toney, one of the players of the season so far. So in that context, maybe it's not that bad a point or 2 points dropped. In that context, you take the point. But given what's to come, if you're Arsenal, you're probably hoping for a little bit more, especially given the fact that you take the lead at home. That's when you want to see your title-chasing team put distance between themselves and everybody else. If you take the lead, you do not want to be dropping points against Brentford, against Manchester City, against anybody.
Well, one thing is for sure, Arsenal maintain the lead, but with Man City playing tomorrow, they'll also keep that game in hand, though Man City comes up next, as Shaka Hislop said. We actually have James Olley joining us now from the Emirates. He was there watching this game. James Olley, good to have you again, my friend. I haven't spoken to you since the World Cup. I feel like it's been 2 years now. It's great to have you, buddy. James Olley, give me your initial reaction. Shaq and I were just talking about some points wasted for Arsenal, but we can't take away all the great things that Thomas Frank has done with the Bees.
No, I mean, Brentford were full value for their point, really. Look, I mean, I just sort of written a piece for the site along these lines. This is the sixth consecutive Premier League game that Arsenal have named the same starting lineup. They've named the same lineup in every Premier League game since the World Cup. And I think what we saw today was quite a strong case for freshening it up. You know, there's a point underlined by the fact that Leandro Trossard was the goal scorer for them today, a substitute coming off the bench and obviously a January signing. They sort of ran out of ideas a little bit here, and I think that's quite ominous for them now that you know they're going to have 3 games a week coming up, and obviously it's Manchester City on Wednesday. But that fixture on Wednesday really presents quite a conundrum for Miguel Arteta for me, because, as I say, the evidence is quite clear that I think this team needs just not massive rotation, but maybe 1 or 2 fresh legs, a few fresh ideas in there. But you've got your main rivals coming to your home on Wednesday, and surely you want to reward the players that have got you into the position to be top of the league with a cushion clear after whatever it is, 21, 22 games. So I think that's a really difficult one for Arteta in the coming days. He'll obviously recover from this and assess in training in terms of what lineup he's going to go with. But it just felt a little bit like 1 or 2 of the players, Gabriel Martinelli perhaps most obviously, have just come off the level where they were earlier in the season that have got them to such a great position.
James, I'm going to come back to you in a second, obviously, because I really want to know a little bit more as well about the overall Arsenal sentiment after that point. But Shaka, just one thing that Olley just said right there regarding the fact that Mikel Arteta continues to stick with the same lineup. I think that when you have a very experienced, deep squad, sometimes you think, all right, that might work, might not. But Shaka, what do you make of that? Specifically because this is an average age, what is it, like 24.7 years old? As a former player, somebody in a team, like what do you think the advantages or disadvantages are with something like Arteta, what he's doing right now, really just sticking with the program?
I'm going to echo a lot of what James just said. In that, I have no problem with Arteta sticking with the same starting lineup, one that's got them to top of the league, continuing to show faith. And listen, we say it all the time, regardless of who you are, every single season you're going to go through a spell where things just don't seem to click. And the good teams are the ones who somehow seem to keep picking up points. Arsenal got a point today. Through those spells, who don't drop a lot, who still manage to keep things ticking over, and you play your way out of that spell. So on the one hand, you can quite easily applaud Arteta for sticking by this squad, for wanting to see, and again, we're talking about a lean spell where you've lost 1 and drawn 1. I mean, by any other measure, we're not really talking about a spell. It's just we know, again, how good City are and how, in the past, how frail Arsenal can be. But to that point, and James mentioned it, I don't think Martinelli has been great. And Trossard, when he has come on, has had an impact. So if you're Arteta, I think the time is right to now think, well, do I play Trossard from the very start? Now, Martinelli is quick, and defenses coming up against that kind of pace, you have to adjust. Just for that pure speed that Martinelli brings, but he hasn't had much of an impact. He's not been playing well. So the easy change, I think, given the form of Trossard, given the fact that he's finally got on the score sheet for Arsenal, is that you have to play him from the very start.
An early test of the business that Arsenal did in January, probably an earlier test than they would have liked. But if you go back to that window and you think that they tried to get Miguel Mudryk, they didn't get him. They ended up with Trossard. They tried to get Moises Caicedo out of Brighton. They didn't get him. They've ended up with Jorginho. I know Mudryk's hardly torn up any trees yet at Chelsea, but they were two big money, high profile signings they went for there to really give them an upgrade in terms of the quality that they had in those positions. And what they've ended up getting are two very competent. I like Trossard, and I think Jorginho gets a bad rap in many ways. I think they're two very solid, proven Premier League performers. But do they improve the starting 11? Do they, by the levels of quality that they produce on the known form that we know of those two players, do they materially improve the team? That is a debate. Now, Caicedo and Mudryk may well have taken Arsenal to another level. They didn't get those players over the line. We're now going to find out in the coming weeks and months whether maybe not settling, but missing out on those players and ended up maybe dropping down a level to Trossard and Jorginho, just how much of an impact that is going to have in the title race in the second half of the season.
Well, we also know about Gabriel Jesus, of course, that he's back at least getting rehabbing, getting a little bit faster. We know that Eddie Nketiah, as much of a strong team player he is, all the pressures cannot just lie on his shoulders. James, Olley, how far away is Gabriel Jesus from coming back into action, and how detrimental has it been for his absence, and how substantial is it going to be when he comes back?
Yeah, he's still a few weeks away. I know, just from speaking to people around here, I think the player's pushing very, very hard to try and get back. I think Arsenal are just wary of him rushing that process. And obviously, if he was to get another setback and be out even further into the end of March and April, that would be a huge blow for them. Look, I mean, I go against the grain a little bit here. I think Eddie Nketiah is a very popular player. He's obviously a local, come through the academy, and they like him a lot. I still think he's got something to prove at the highest level. In the big games, he performed very well and steps into the shoes of Gabriel Jesus. But I think when you think about going into a game like Wednesday in particular, Manchester City, I mean, obviously the comparisons with Haaland, but I don't think you can rely on Eddie Nketiah in those big games yet. He's only 21. He's still got plenty of time. He may develop into that player. But if we're talking about the here and now in a title race, you would you would think about Gabriel Jesus being a big game player, being someone who could step up in those moments. And I just felt today, this was another example of where maybe teams have just started to work Eddie Nketiah out a little bit. I'm not pinning the result on him exclusively, because I think Arsenal were a little bit flat, surprisingly flat actually in the first half, considering how well they've talked about their training this week and wanting to see this reaction after losing at Everton. But he's not quite as sharp a focal head for this team as you would think Gabriel Jesus should be, or his pedigree suggested that he would be.
Well, let's talk about this game on Wednesday and the title race. Shaka, and then James, please jump in. We know how important it is. It's obviously not a complex question, but how do you see it unfolding, especially as Man City face the greatest team the game has ever seen tomorrow? What's going to happen, you think, in the build-up to this game? And how do you see it? How do you see this matchup on Wednesday? Because, yes, I believe that Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola will most likely try and calm things down, but it's a massive match.
Sorry, I just had to check my schedule to see exactly who Man City are playing tomorrow.
The greatest team in the world.
So I couldn't resist. That description threw me for a little bit of a loop there, LME. Listen, but to the City Arsenal game, as a neutral, I am looking forward to this. Like few games I can remember. Two so very similar styles, and while we've been discussing Man City and Liverpool, as it has been over the last couple of seasons, Arsenal are a different test. And I think because Arsenal, and of course, given Arteta's own progression as a manager, because their style is so similar to Manchester City's. City have had their problems by their standards this season. And once again, I go back to us comparing these teams with who they themselves have shown themselves to be. So City have had their problems by their standards, but they've continued to play their way. They've continued to try to build out to the back, even when it's given them trouble. Even when I've sat here and made arguments for Edison going back to as he had done in his early City days, spraying 60-yard passes whenever need be, whenever City find themselves under a little bit of pressure at the back. They've not done that. Arsenal similarly continue to play the ball out of the back, even with Ramsdale and how good he has been with the ball at his feet. So now these two teams who play out of the back, who press high up, who, though they have plan Bs available to them, certainly by recent weeks, haven't resorted to them at all. I really am looking forward to this. And wherever you look on the park, in whatever color shirt you decide to focus on, you've got match winners in every single respect. Whether we're talking about defenders coming up with set pieces, whether we're talking about midfielders stepping across lines and stepping into the attacking third, or strikers who've just shown good form. And James is right. Nketiah hasn't been in great form again by Nketiah standards over the last couple of weeks, but we know how impactful he has been over the larger piece since he's been starting, given Gabriel Jesus' injury. And you make that exact same argument for all of City's players, defenders, midfielders, and indeed their attack. I think I'm looking forward to it. Now, if City can just cope with the greatest team ever in the history of football this weekend, if we could just somehow get past that, we look forward to this game, to City Arsenal.
Unai Emery's claret and blue army. James Olley, final word on Man City Arsenal on Wednesday. What do you expect?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we know how City are going to play. I was at Tottenham last weekend, and I was surprised by how sterile they were really in possession and quite how blunted they were. But we know what they're going to do, right? We know they're going to try and monopolise possession. They're going to play with a very high line. They're going to try and work those angles that they've worked so successfully for so many years. And I think Arsenal's approach will be fascinating here, because although they've dropped 2 points today, and assuming that City win against Villa, sorry, LME, tomorrow, but assuming that City win, they're obviously, the momentum will feel like it's with City. Arsenal have kind of got a free hit at this, really. They, even if they lose, they're still in pole position in the title race. Will they go for it? Will they commit to this sort of front foot, dominating possession style, and leave themselves vulnerable to the kind of football that, let's be honest, Erling Haaland really wants to play? I know we're getting into a separate debate here about Haaland, but you think about so many of his goals for Dortmund were about exploiting space, his devastating pace on the break, and how clinical he could be on the counter-attack. Well, City have 70% of the ball in every game they play. So he doesn't tend to get those kind of chances. And I think if Arsenal try to play on the front foot here and try to out City, if you like, and try and make it a real compact game where the game's being played in sort of 40 yards, 20 yards in their half of the pitch, 20 yards in City's half of the pitch, the risk is if they lose it, is in behind. And if Haaland gets in behind, he's going to cause them all sorts of problems. So it's going to be an absolutely fascinating game on a knife edge. And I think, the challenge for Arteta is to convince his players that they still can treat this game a bit like a free hit. They still have that cushion to be able to, and have the confidence to go and express themselves. Because if they start looking over their shoulder, if they start thinking about the lead beginning to erode, some nerves will creep in, a bit of tension will creep in, a bit like it did today here. And that will only count against them in that match and going forward.
Well, Pep Guardiola and Man City looking for a reaction after a pretty crazy week on and off the pitch, as not just obviously the financial situation, but losing against Tottenham. Speaking of Tottenham, what a great win for Tottenham against Manchester City. You would have thought weekend away at Leicester City, who are really kind of struggling this season. You would have thought, well, should be a good game. Well, guess what? Leicester City 4-1 against Tottenham. Unbelievable.
It was a good
Shaka.
game.
That's 8 goals for Brendan Rodgers' side in 2 matches. And Tottenham, you beat Man City and you get killed by Leicester City one other weekend. Give me your reactions to that one.
Let me tell you something. I did not see this coming. Given the result against City, as you mentioned, I spoke about good teams taking the lead and holding on to that lead. Spurs did exactly that against Leicester, albeit away to Leicester. And I thought deservedly so. I thought, all right, there was a lot of good fortune, if you're Spurs or Bentancur to the point, about Spurs' opener. But I thought Spurs started well for an away team. And then they concede. And then Spurs just capitulate. Once Spurs concede, and this kind of has been the complaint around Spurs for so much of their season. At times, they've waited for the opponent to score before they start playing their football. And certainly in this case, they score, the opponent responds, and they just down tools in a way that was concerning if you're Antonio Conte. Antonio Conte back on the sidelines, by the way, witnessing that. That was as inept a performance we'd seen from a potential top four finisher for some time. It was embarrassingly bad for Spurs once Leicester got their opening goal.
Yeah, the inconsistency for Tottenham is alarming, of course. And by the way, they have AC Milan as well coming up in the Champions League. James, Olley, Rodrigo Bentancur, the Uruguayan, scored the opener. He's been a very important player for Tottenham. So I've got a two-way question for you here. Number one, the top four chances, fading away, and how big would it be if Rodrigo Bentancur, who I believe got injured in this match, how big is that kind of absence for them?
Yeah, it will be a huge blow for them. Look, Bentancur and Kulusevski coming in last January was the difference in them getting the Champions League football and finishing above Arsenal. Those two were superb, and they don't have another player like Bentancur. Really, you can give them that some semblance of control in midfield, and they don't really have anyone who has the variety of passing, just the range of ability that Bentancur has. But look, top four wise, although this sounds silly to say it, I suppose after they've shut out Manchester City, but they just don't have a defence that's good enough. They do not defend well enough to get in the top four at the moment, and it's quite surprising of an Antonio Conte side. But I don't have the numbers in front of me because I'm at Arsenal, not at Tottenham, but there is a stat about when Antonio Conte has a clear week to work with his players, how much better they are, how much better drilled they are, how everyone seems to know their roles, and they produce a much more sort of clear, defined performance. And this, I guess, is an example. Obviously, Conte's had the gallbladder operation that he's recovering from. It smacks again of this inconsistency of just sitting of Spurs not being able to produce a consistent defensive performance, which is the foundation for everything else. I think Tanganga played today. He's obviously come in partly because Romero's injured, but I think Davinson Sanchez was on the bench. You'd think Sanchez would be playing. So that's a bit of a strange call. Hugo Lloris has been questioned a lot in recent weeks, but Fraser Forster's hardly played any football, certainly any Premier League football, for a long time. And now they're even thinking about trying to bring Ben Foster out of retirement to sign him as a backup. So they've clearly got an issue in the goalkeeping position. At centre-back, I think even when everyone's fit, Eric Dyer was fantastic against Manchester City, but there are question marks about him longer term in terms of his form. Clement Longley, is he actually good enough for the Premier League, for a top four Premier League side? There have to be debates about that. Obviously, the right wing-back situation has been a complete mess all season. They signed Jed Spence. They didn't play him. They were going to loan Matt Doherty out. They ended up ripping his contract. They bought Pedro Porro in today. Difficult for him to come and make his debut in a game like that. So there are a lot of questions defensively to answer for Spurs. And look, we all know going forward with Kane, Son, Kulusevski, Richarlison when he's back, they've got some tremendous attacking players, but they just do not defend well enough, consistently enough to put any sort of serious stock in thinking as it stands they're going to finish in the top four.
Yeah, Newcastle, who obviously play later, will be the happier, but also Brighton, who have 2 games in hand and only 4 points behind Tottenham. And by the way, to your point about Conte needing a full week, well, that's not going to happen anytime soon if they continue, of course, in the Champions League. So we'll have to see how that works out. Shaka, Hislop, West Ham and Chelsea earlier today drew 1-1. All that money since all those players came to Chelsea. Mudryk, we've talked about. Enzo Fernandez, we've talked about, of course. Joao Felix coming back from suspension, but yet they can't get a victory. 1-1 at the London Stadium. Initial reaction from that one?
Well, initial reaction has got to be about the handball and how that wasn't given. Even as a former West Ham player, I don't get me wrong, I'm delighted, but I am as bemused as anybody as
let's
to
set the
how.
picture here, Shaka, before you continue. Of course, there was a shot outside of the box towards the end of this game. Souček was sliding down on the ball quite clearly. It came out of his body. He would clearly, extended his body in order to stop this ball from going, whether it's intentional or not. Well, you can clearly see that he intended to open his arm. It touched his hand. VAR didn't even suggest to the referee that it was a penalty, and it stayed 1-0. Continue, my friend.
Let me tell you, it was as clear a handball as you will ever see, right? There's no other way to describe it. But of course, if that brings a penalty, Chelsea still have to score the penalty. But you wonder if that were given, especially later on, if that would have been papering over some of the cracks for Chelsea, because West Ham had a goal ruled out for offside moments before. I think I'm right to say, I'm trying. I've been watching so many games now. I'm getting on right, and that was, well, it was fairly close, right? I think Rice was just offside. Souček tapping in, and as I say, that was ruled out. But I thought what Graham Potter said after the game really summed Chelsea up. That in the first half, you saw the potential. You saw the potential of all this talent being available to Graham Potter and to Chelsea. In the second half, you saw the challenges with getting all these new signings to play together, to sing in the same, on the same sound sheet. Because again, watching this, and the first half an hour, I thought this was going to be 5 or 6 in Chelsea's favour. I really did. Chelsea were outstanding. They were purring. And then all of a sudden, the last 15 or 20 minutes of the first half, I thought West Ham got a whole lot better. Michael Antonio brings a good save out of Kepa, and then the goal comes. And at that point, West Ham looked pretty comfortable. But this is the last 10 minutes of the first half, as I say. And then the second half, I thought was more even. So, which is why I think, again, what Potter said really summed up Chelsea right now. You see how good they can be, but integrating all this talent all at once brings some issues.
James, Olley, let me ask you something. We write contribute towards the weekend review here at ESPN, and me and you were talking online about how one of the topic points here needs to be, look, $800 million was spent in the January transfer window in the Premier League. Chelsea spent half of that. So what's bigger at this point? Bowley's, millions or his patience? Because, one victory in 2023, and common sense should say, look, Graham Potter, he's a good manager. He needs time, et cetera, et cetera. But, sometimes in the Premier League, the pressures of financial responsibility are bigger than common sense. How do you see this Chelsea thing unfolding? And are they all in on the Champions League now? Because they're not going to get the top 4, clearly.
Chelsea is that the ownership has changed, but the fan base hasn't. And the fans are used to success. They are used to the hire and fire culture. They're used to the Roman Abramovich way of working. And obviously everyone knows that there's been a change of ownership. And Todd Bowley and Clear Lake Capital have made a concerted effort to invest heavily in the squad to show that, look, we are, we're serious about this. We are here to stay, all of those sort of things. They're ninth. They're ninth in the Premier League. They've won 2 of their last 13 games. And I think what will determine Graham Potter's fate will be the fans as much as anything else. If that fan base starts to turn on Graham Potter, what do these owners do? They're dishing out 7-8 year contracts to these players. This is not going to be a case of we're going to jettison 5, 6, 7 of these new signings. They're building a very expensive, long-term squad founded on young players. And if the manager is not getting the best out of them, yes, they're going to. We did a story on the site on Friday that they are going to get rid of quite a few players in the summer, sort of the fringe players, but the core is there. The core has been established. And if Graham Potter can't get results with that core, there's going to come a point where the fans are going to say, well, look, you've spent top dollar on all of these, supposedly some of the most high-profile, exciting, dynamic, best young players in Europe. We need a manager at that level to manage them. I hope Graham Potter does well. He should get time because it's a crazy situation that he's had to preside over. You think about just even Shaka will know this much better than I will. Just the volume of players that he's got to deal with in training every day, trying to keep those players invested when only 11 of them can start and only 5 of them can come off the bench. Extremely difficult situation for him. But these fans expect success, and if they keep dropping points and they keep producing underwhelming performances, it can only go on for so long.
Shaka, very quick before we move on. Where do Chelsea end at the end of the season?
6, maybe 7. I think there'll be some improvement from the league position right now, but I don't see them getting to the top 4.
And they don't win the Champions League, right?
I can't see it. Not this version. I can't see it. Not this version of Chelsea. But then you could say that about 90% of the teams still left in the Champions League. Real Madrid aren't who they once were, or who they were last season. PSG have been stuttering. Liverpool, need I say any more? So, like I say, while I say here with some confidence that I don't see this Chelsea winning the Champions League, who of Europe's big boys are playing in really good form? The answer is none. The best team right now in Europe is Napoli.
Yeah, preach, brother. Preach. All right, we're going to say goodbye to James Olley. Hey, James, very quickly, before we say goodbye, Man City Villa, what's the score tomorrow?
3-1, City.
Okay, James, thank you so much. Enough for you. Bye-bye. Get home safe, buddy. He's done. He's done. All right, Shaka, before we say goodbye, very quickly on tomorrow's matches. By the way, Manchester United against Leeds actually open up Sunday. It was a very entertaining game midweek. United 2-0 down. They come back up to make it 2-0. And obviously, Shaka, United looking at Arsenal drawing. I know that obviously there's quite a distance, but United obviously is still in this top 4 race as well and trying to climb even more. How do you see that game going?
Listen, I think Manchester United have been outstanding for so much of this season. And I have to say, Erik ten Hag has gotten so much right all season long. And his situation, though very different from Graham Potter's, was also very difficult to navigate. But even when things have gone against them, the Casemiro sending off as an example, I thought everything he said, the way he managed it, was absolutely spot on. I know the ESPNFC crew were divided on whether that was a sending off or not. He made no excuses. He didn't try to blame anybody. He just said, this is who we are as a team. We stand up for each other. We take those knocks as they come. And I thought that was brilliant. I've become a huge fan. But of course, now you've got Leeds, and given how they've given their and that new manager bounce that we were talking about Everton, and you witnessed some of that. Can that continue? At Ellen Road as well, tough place. This is a big test, but I think Manchester United have dealt with a lot that has been thrown at them. Even when they've been second best, they've continued to manage to get points. See that Leeds game, and I think going to Ellen Road is not too big a ask for them. I think Manchester United get the job done. I think they get 3 points. It'll be close. It'll be hard fought. It's not going to be a 4-1. There won't be more than a goal in this. So now just wait for everybody racing to go. If you're going to put a bet on it, given what I just said, put a bet on 3 or 4 goal spread, because I am awful when it comes to getting my predictions anywhere close to being right.
Me and you as well, my friend. I won't even ask. I'm not even going to ask you who's going to win the Super Bowl tomorrow because it might be a problem right there as well.
Rihanna's going to win the Super Bowl.
Hey, as long as she plays Ponder Replay, I'm happy.
Let's be honest. That's what we're all tuning in for.
I love it. But one thing is true, though. If United win tomorrow, everybody, and, if City don't get their way against Villa, then United are second. So just, obviously there's a few games in hand for City, but the United train keeps on rolling. They've only lost once this year. Very quickly, Shaka, Man City, Villa. I'm not going to switch you off. I want your honest opinion. But very quickly, how do you see that one, Man City, Villa, straight away?
I think Man City get the win. I think they recognize how big a week it is for them with the Arsenal game coming up. They also recognize how poor they had been last week against Spurs, and that was an opportunity that could have brought so much more. But Arsenal let them off. Well, Arsenal let them off the hook, and then losing to Everton. I just feel that Pep Guardiola is going to have them prepared for this one. And probably City, given the week that they had, given the result of last week, is not the team you wanted to face now, even if you are the greatest team on the face of the earth.
I appreciate the words. Well, Villa haven't beaten Man City since 2013. They haven't beaten City at the Etihad since 2007. So, I'm just going to have my heart over my head in this one. But you're quietly right. Pep Guardiola is looking out for blood in that one. We'll see what happens. And we'll be back tomorrow as well. But this one will be right after Manchester United Leeds. And we'll talk a little bit more about Man City Villa. But Shaka, Hislop, Luis Miguel Echegaray, ESPNFC. Have a fantastic rest of your Saturday. And we'll see you tomorrow. Till then, bye-bye.